Welcome back, adventurer. This week's creatures have been described as the first vampire, a very tall lady with scissors, and a giant worm, and maybe a fish. So come, pull up a stool at Creature Tavern. Well, if it ain't my favourite adventurer. Always a fine day when you stop by. Ready for this week's creature sightings? We'll start with the one of Abhartach, from Irish folklore, or maybe you know him by his other name, Europe's first vampire. So what comes to mind when you think vampire, my adventuring friend? A handsome devil, maybe? A charming seducer, lurking in moonlight corridors? Well, that's not how the story of Abhartach goes. Some records call him a dwarf, but not the kindly sort you'll find whistling down mines. No, Abhartach's legend ripples with titles of warlord, chieftain, and a magician of the dark arts. From what I've gathered, he was best known as the twisted little tyrant who ruled with cruelty, feared by all who had the misfortune of living under his iron grip. The few folks brave enough to speak his name give him a slightly different description. They say he was a regular man, whose physical body was contorted and deformed beyond repair, creating this grotesque and unnatural dictator. The only overlap between the stories is the hatred and fear his people felt for him. In every account, the people desperately yearned for his demise, but were all too afraid to ever do anything about it. He ruled over the lands east of the River Foyle, between Dungiven and Govag, in a place called the Glen of the Eagle in Northern Ireland. This was no grand kingdom, mind, but a patchwork of warring territories, each ruled by a chieftain vying for control. Tensions ran high in Abhartach's land, resulting in his banishment to the grave. We'll get to that soon, adventurer. But you can find his grave, if you have a mind to, in a patch of land north of Derry, in the parish of Irgal. The locals call it Slowtaverty, though some know it as the Giant's Grave. It's a quiet, eerie place, and the site is marked by a giant capstone and a towering tree of thorns that have grown wild over the centuries, as though nature itself is trying to keep them contained. When researching the site, I found that folks tend to steer clear of it, and I'd advise you do the same. Those who've dared disturb the site have been met with strange and unfortunate fates. Numerous attempts to cut down the tree saw tools fail unexpectedly. One man even lost a hand when a chain broke while trying to remove the large capstone seal, causing blood to drip into the soil, possibly sating Abhartach's long hunger. Most folks say it's just bad luck, but regulars here believe that Abhartach's appetite reaches far beyond the grave. Now on to what this totally not sexy vampire can do. In life, he was feared as a warlock of great power, but I wasn't able to find any record detailing what his power was exactly. With Abhartach, the fun starts after death. Some say he met his first death by accident, spying on his wife. Jealous and suspecting her of cheating, he crept out onto a high window's ledge, only to lose his footing and plummet all the way down, hitting the earth with an almighty thud, like a balloon full of wet cement. The tale goes that the people were over the moon, even celebrating as they buried him, free at last. But come dawn, there he was, standing amongst them, unharmed and demanding his subjects slit their wrists as a blood tribute. Frightened, they all complied. Other fables say his first death came at the hands of a neighbouring village chieftain named Cathane, who the people sought out in desperation. It's claimed he kills Abhartach and buries him, only for the deformed villain to return the next morn. Again and again, Cathane struck him down, and each time, the first vampire rose again. His cruelty deepened with each return, his demand for blood growing more gluttonous, and his power over his terrified subjects more absolute. Finally, the wise men of the kingdom were consulted. I don't know why they didn't go there first, to be honest. What these men were differs from scroll to scroll. Sometimes they're druids. Others they're saints. But they suspected that something darker had taken hold of Abhartach. That he'd crossed a threshold few ever dare. He wasn't a simple sorcerer anymore. He had become something worse. Europe's first vampire. So, what happened to Abhartach, and how might you survive an encounter with him? Well, you know me, adventurer. I've got tips and tricks to handle any creature, even immortal warlords. Firstly, you'll need to bring a sword. But not a metal one, like you'll see here hanging on the walls. You'll need one made completely of yew wood. And you'll need to drive it directly into the heart of his stubborn corpse and leave it there. That'll be enough to stop Abhartach in his tracks. Once you've got his cold, limp body, you'll want to stash it somewhere. And your best option is to bury him. I know I just told you he comes back from all that, but what I didn't say is that those druids discovered that if you bury Abhartach upside down, then his magical power seems to be disabled. And that's how he's been kept in that grave for all these years. So if he ever gets out, make sure to stick him back in head first. And lastly, if you're ever reburying this deformed tyrant, then make sure to place ash branches and thorns around the grave, as well as a great stone seal atop. This will keep the creature locked away, or at least make escape uncomfortable. All this talk of blood reminds me. Have you seen the new blood brew on tap? Here, I'll fetch us a few pints. Hello, listener. It's your lightly caffeinated Tavernkeeper here. Thanks for listening to episode 9 of Creature Tavern. It's a true blast doing all this. I really hope you're enjoying the experience as much as I am of putting these together. And now, as usual, on to the business. If you post about the show using the hashtag Creature Tavern, not on X at the moment, apparently pretending to be a Tavernkeeper is against their terms of service, so that is temporarily suspended, but you still can do on Blue Sky. There's a chance you'll end up woven into one of these tales. Maybe as a famed turnip wrangler who pulls up more than some tasty veg. Or perhaps a misunderstood turnip beast, yanked out of the ground by a confused turnip wrangler. Either way, your name will be immortalised, or it'll at least stick around for a good few years. If you're tuning in on YouTube, leave us a comment. I'd love to know which strange beasts or dusty corners of folklore you'd like us to poke at next. And if you're really enjoying your stay at the tavern, spread the word. Tell a friend, or better yet, a few friends. We grow on word of mouth alone, so every little bit you do is truly and honestly appreciated. Thank you very much. Alright, that's enough business talk, for now at least. There's creatures, chaos, and something bubbling in a suspicious stein waiting for us. So let's get back to the tavern. Thanks for sticking around. How'd you find the brew, adventurer? A fine pour, I reckon. But mind you, the next one won't be free. Have a think on that while we get into our next beastie for the week. You may have encountered one of these already. Simply pass them on the street without a second glance, blissfully unaware of its sinister nature. I'm of course talking about the Kuchisake-onna from Japanese folklore. The Kuchisake-onna is a spirit you don't want to cross paths with. They're vengeance bound, spirits of dead women who were killed in particularly violent ways, abused wives or tortured captives, just to name a few, all belonging to a family of spirit known as the Onro, said to have long black hair, white hands, skin as pale as the dead's, usually draped in long white dresses, or in a few cases I did find them in red, and quite fairer than most, standing tall at 5'9", though some reckon she looms closer to 8 foot. Now, apart from the 8 foot height, it doesn't sound too out of the ordinary, adventurer? Well, when out on your travels, there's one curious habit you can look out for. she's always hiding her mouth. In my research, I found that a Kuchisake-onna will usually cover her mouth with a scarf, fan, or most commonly, a face mask. And she doesn't wear this for fashion. This covering is to hide the true mark of a Kuchisake-onna, a wide mutilation of her mouth, sliced ear to ear in a grotesque grin that ain't meant for joy. But if you don't fancy going around yanking masks off of women, there's another sign to watch for. A Kuchisake-onna is rarely empty-handed. In fact, if you ever met one, you'll find her clutching a weapon. And from what I've heard, this will usually be a knife, a machete, a large pair of scissors, or sometimes even a sickle. Tales on how a Kuchisake-onna is created differ mouth to mouth. Some say she was the wife of a samurai, punished for infidelity. Her husband's rage sealing her tragic fate with the sharp edge of a blade. Others say she was the victim of a botched medical procedure. There's even a few tales of a scorned lover or jealous rival responsible for carving that hideous smile into her face. But the most commonly cited reason for her mutilation is that she was unfaithful to her husband, who punished her by cutting her mouth ear to ear with a pair of scissors. Whatever the cause, the Kuchisake-onna are now out, looking for revenge and prepared to kill anyone they encounter as retribution for their stolen beauty. You won't find a Kuchisake-onna in the forests or in the mountains. Legends say she lingers by flickering lanterns, where shadows stretch in dimly lit streets and empty alleys. A few of the regulars reckon she's taken a liking to cities and towns. Keeps herself tucked away till the crowd's thin. That's when she steps out, all quiet like, waiting for the next poor soul what strayed too far from the pack. Now listen closer, my well-dressed adventurer. Should fate ever steer you into the path of a Kuchisake-onna, you best know what's coming. You'll notice her eyes. Shimmering like pools of midnight, they say. Some even describe them as beautiful. Impossible to look away from. That's one of the ways she gets you. You won't think to run. You won't feel the danger creeping in. Her gaze kind of warms you. And her voice, that seals the deal. Many accounts say Kuchisake-onna speaks soft, almost hypnotic. Each word a lure, gently pulling you closer and closer into her snare. Most victims likely never even realise the peril they're in until it's far, far too late. Once you're close enough, the true threat begins. You're not going to hear her scream. You're not going to hear her screech, or even snarl. Instead, you'll hear a question. Watashi wa kiri? That translates to, am I pretty? And I'll be straight with you, adventurer. This ain't no ordinary question. This is more like a test. Or maybe more accurately described as a trap. So let's say you've encountered a Kuchisake-onna. You've been met with this question. But you've got a specific type. Maybe you're into fae. So you respond, no. Well, that's it for you. She'll kill you on the spot, swift and emotionless, with a flash of her scissors. But you look like you're more of a kinder soul, not one to upset a young woman. So you say yes. Well, you're moving on to round 2. In this round, she'll draw in a little closer, with a face filled with glee, and show you what's become of her smile. Lowering her mask, fan or scarf, you'll be exposed to the grotesque truth. A mouth torn from ear to ear, jagged and bloodied. Some accounts even suggest her mouth may be lined with razor-sharp teeth. And then she'll ask her next question. Kore demo? And that translates to even now. Your instinct here may be to run, but that's not going to help with this tall beauty, as Kuchisake-onna are said to possess supernatural speed. So maybe you'll scream or gasp, but you better not. Doing so, or worse, saying no, will result in one of two things. Some legends say you'll be killed on the spot. Others say you'll leave with your life, but only after the Kuchisake-onna has taken her scissors and sliced through your cheeks, giving you your own eternal smile. So you're best off answering yes, right? The law here gets a bit fuzzy. One version says she'll nod, all pleased with herself. Curiosity sated and ego boosted. She'll vanish into the dark. But don't get too cozy. She's not done with you. She'll start to follow you, just out of sight. Wait until you're home alone before slicing you up like fresh meat. Other tellings say she'll let you walk free. Aye, but not without a parting gift. A fresh smile of your own, carved right across your face. But if you're lucky, you'll get the rarer tellings. These ones say she simply leaves you alone. No following, no cutting. You'll simply go your separate ways, like passing ships in the night. Now, if you don't fancy taking part in this Kuchisake-onna game show, I've got a few tips on how to truly survive the encounter. From what I can tell, the real trouble with a Kuchisake-onna is that you don't know that you're dealing with one till you hear that deceptively innocent question. But it turns out it's rather easy to escape, should the legends be true. Simply answer by describing her looks as perfectly average. Or you can skip over her questions completely by saying you're running late. Then the Kuchisake-onna will bow, apologise, and let you on your way. Can you polite for a murderous spirit? But if you're not actually in a rush, or forget that first helpful tip, you can overwhelm her with a constant barrage of quick and confusing answers. Some lucky folks I spoke with said this approach seemed to disorientate the Onro, just enough to make a getaway. Another handy way in which to evade a Kuchisake-onna is to repeat the word pomade 3 times. It's said that the person responsible for her signature smile wore this particular hair wax, and now she's got a guttural reaction to its name. But be quick, you'll only have a few breaths before her nerves settle. Or lastly, if you'd prefer a sweeter escape, then it's rumoured Kuchisake-onna love money and boiled sweets. Specifically, Beko Ame. Just toss a couple of these her way and she'll stop to pick them up, giving you ample opportunity to leave. Now if you excuse me, adventurer, I've just spied someone entering with a mask, and I fancy putting this boiled sweet treat to the test. I'll be right back. Hello again, listener. You've made it to the second ad break, so well done to you. You're a true friend of the tavern. And speaking of the tavern, if you fancy helping out, you don't need to pick up a broom or start pulling pints. Hitting that subscribe button, that'll do just fine. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere mono moths spin their cocoons. Just search for Creature Tavern. And while you're there, why not leave a review? Or if you're listening on YouTube, drop a comment. They really help boost the show, and we're always looking to get more bodies in the tavern. Now that's enough begging for another week. Let's head back to the tavern for our final creature. Thanks again for your support, listener. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw them so bloody hard. Yeah, Tab's in the house tonight. Yeah, give him a few more too. Yeah, it'll help bring down the sting. Well, if you try that boiled sweet trick, make sure to wait for the question first, and watch how hard you throw them. Turns out you can do a canny bit of damage with these. Anyways, ready for our third creature? We're looking at the Minhocão from Brazilian folklore. Or you may know it as the Great Snake or Big Worm. Hearing that, I bet you're conjuring up images of a harmless little wriggler swimming around in the dirt. And you're not far off. Just times that little critter by around 1,000? and you've got yourself a Minhocão. This colossal creature is massive, but you'll hear different numbers depending on who's talking and how many drinks they've had. Some claim it's 65 to 165 feet round the middle, and you're looking at 260 feet in length. To give you something to anchor that to in your head, that's near as long as 20 wagons hitched end to end, or the full length of the town square twice over. Big enough to call around a tavern like this with tail to spare. But I've also heard tales of it being close to 30 feet, but still able to grow up to that massive 260 feet length I mentioned earlier, and several yards wide. That's not a creature you fight, my green-thumbed adventurer. That's one you dodge, duck, dip, dive and dodge. One learned fella, a Dr. Fitzmuller, claimed it measured 46 metres long and nearly 5 across. And when digging around, I found that most accounts agree that the Minhocão is a giant worm. But would you believe that a few folks swear it's actually a fish? Specifically, a South American lungfish. A true fish as well, aye, with fins, gills, the lot. But the truth? Probably somewhere in between. And still far more dangerous than any worm you've ever encountered. Trust me on that one, adventurer. Most sketches depict the worm with a great, well-developed mouth. This powerful gaping maw looks ready to drag in a horse with ease. Some dust-covered scrolls I've found liken the mouth to a pig's snout. All fleshy and sniffing. And then it has horns, like twisted tree roots erupting from its skull. And its skin, I hear you ask? Well, Dr. Fitz says it's a bone-like armour. Almost like a kind of exoskeleton. However, most folks describe it as bark-like. Picture the rough hide of a pine tree, cracked and armoured, or the plated shell of an armadillo. In fact, I managed to uncover some old journals. Those leather-bound dusty pages claim the Minhocão might even be related to the ancient ancestors of those armoured beasts, like some lost cousin that never stopped mutating. What's even more bizarre is that group on a table at the back there, but those people reckon the Minhocão's got legs. Little stubby things. Like the vestigial limbs of something caught halfway between land and sea. But even they question that rumour. It might be legs, they say, but I wouldn't be counting on it. And speaking of those who've eyed the beast, there were stories of one boy who claimed he heard a pine tree fall clean over. No wind, no woodcutter, just went straight down. So he ran over to the site and found a great crack in the earth. Through that, it's claimed he glimpsed something. A deep black worm-like creature, shining like oil and no longer than a lasso. Of course, no one thought to ask him how long he thought a lasso was. So if you want to avoid this behemoth, I'll advise you steer clear of southern Brazil. That's where Dr. Fitzmuller claims it lies. But let's be honest, adventurer, you're not one to shy away from spying behind the curtain of ordinary, are you? Every page I've found on the Minhocão said they keep to burrows, deep beneath the wet earth. Dry land, it wants nothing to do with that. But give it a stretch of clay riverbank, a murky bog, or a muddy lake, and it'll call that home sweet home. A lot of people I spoke with say the creature's true home lies in the waters of central western Brazil, specifically a region named Goiás, but no one can agree on a single lake. You see that lady over there? One holding the pipe in each hand? She says her party spotted one near the Padre Aranda and Fia Lakes. Or that explorer-looking pair over there, they pointed to another couple lakes. The dwarf says it's Rio das Almas, and the horn fella says it's Rio das Mortes. But in truth, it could honestly be anywhere the ground's soft and wet enough to move through. It doesn't need deep waters. It doesn't want the ocean. It likes the lakes and muddy bogs. The kind of places you're likely to lose a boot or two. So if you're ever wandering through the southern wilds of Brazil, and the trees are leaning strangely, or the earth rumbles under your feet without reason, you might have stumbled into giant worm country. Now I reckon your curiosity is going to get the better of you. I bet you're going to go hunting this mighty beast. Well, don't let the name fool you. Big worm might sound sluggish, maybe even a little docile. But the Minhocão is anything but slow. No, it ain't no Kuchisake-onna with a supernatural speed, but thanks to its sheer size, the Minhocão is considered a force of nature. If you try to run from an encounter, it didn't so much catch up to you, it was likely already there, waiting just beneath the mud. You see, I've heard many a bard's song about the winding waterways of Pantanal, with no mention of rain or erosion, but that the Minhocão's relentless burrowing formed these great channels. They saw it chewing through the earth like butter, leaving behind a deep winding gorge, later filled with rain. And it didn't do this because it has a passion for irrigation engineering, mind you, just because it doesn't care what's in its path. Roots, rocks, your childhood hamster you buried all those years ago, all torn through like a wet rag. You'll be able to tell a Minhocão's coming by the tremble beneath your boots. There's no missing it. The ground will start rolling, thunderous, like as if you're walking atop a storm itself. Some folks say it feels like a horde of panicked war horses pounding towards you. It honestly happens so often, folks mix the two up. Either way, I'd start moving if you feel that rumbling, lest you fancy spending the rest of your days taking a dirt nap under a few hundred horses, or one angry worm. Ah, you've got that look on your face again. There's a question brewing. Let me guess. You're thinking, what's this critter eat then? Well, it eats cattle and horses mostly. They'll be gone without a trace. I spoke with a few folks that crossed paths with this beastie. Said a giant gaping maw thrust up from the earth, snatched at the soft underbelly of these innocent four-legged souls, and yanked them down into the muck. No chance to run, no bones left to bury, just a churned up patch of dirt. I don't think you're safe travelling by water either. There was few, but enough pages said that boats don't fare much better either. These fishermen tales tell stories of desperately hungry or angry Minhocão turning calm waters into twisting, violent whirlpools, dragging entire canoes down in seconds and swallowing the fishermen whole too. All because one thirsty fella took a canteen of water from its domain. Yeah, the Minhocão is incredibly territorial, which is difficult to track considering their immense size. Now sometimes, so the old tales say, it ain't a ripple in the water or a quake in the earth that'll give it away, but an overpowering roar, not a screech like your regular worms. No, this'll be a deep, booming bellow, like mountains are splitting apart. And most impressively, this roar can carry for leagues, echoing across forests, ridges and valleys, locking all who hear it in place, frozen, waiting for the second sound, perhaps a rumbling, or worse still, silence. Now on to our guide for how to handle yourself should you encounter one of these titans. Honestly, there ain't much in the way of documented encounters with a Minhocão. These muddy leviathans tend to swallow anyone who gets too close. But there was one tale told of a Minhocão that had gotten itself wedged between two great boulders. Unable to free itself, it ended up perishing from hunger. So if you've got enough time and party members, I reckon you could easily pull something similar off. So, other than that little trap, we're going to have to get creative here. Now since we know Minhocão are fond of horses or cattle, I suppose you could stuff one with poison, or better yet explosives, and then simply wait till it's swallowed, and boom! You've got yourself one incapacitated worm. Although the legend suggests Minhocão hunt using sound, so you might have to make quite a bit of noise when dragging your stuffed turkey behind you. And I do have to point out again, like some of my other theories, this hasn't been tested. And with that, we're finished with our last creature for the week. We've learned that not all vampires sparkle. Sometimes it helps to be in a hurry, and if you see a worm on the cobblestones, maybe give it a hand. Its cousin might just be a titan. Now that bell means it's last call here at Creature Tavern, so grab yourself one more drink for the road, and until next time, tread carefully, adventurer. You never know when you might wander into the weird